Today I'll be sewing the free pleated skirt pattern from In the Folds in Peppermint magazine. This beautiful vintage-inspired design is just the thing for lazy afternoons spent wandering about town. The skirt is simple yet refined with front and back pleats that give it shape and movement, practical slant pockets, a back invisible zipper, and a clean hem facing for a polished finish. For my version, I've chosen a flight pine print organic cotton woven from Fabricworm. It's soft, easy to work with, and comes in several colorways, and I couldn't resist the delicate bird print. So let's dive in making this timeless skirt together. Here is one of my front skirt pieces, and I'm going to finish that center seam, repeating for both front pieces. Now that both of my center front raw edges are finished, I'll place my front skirt pieces right sides together and pin in place. Sew with a 5/8 inch seam allowance and press the seam open. Now I'll turn my front skirt to the right side and start forming the pleats. Starting with the notch closest to the center seam, I'll bring that notch to the center. And I want the bulk of that pleated fabric to be facing the side seam and pin in place. And I'll pin once again about 1.75 inches below that pin. Then I'll repeat for the next set of notches, bringing one notch to the other. Pinning the pleat in place, once again with the bulk of the pleated fabric facing the side seam, and pin about 1.75 inches below the top pin. Continue for the remaining pleats. Now that I've done one side of the skirt, I'll repeat the pleats for the opposite side of the skirt, starting again with the center pleat, bringing my nearest notch to the center seam and pinning in place. Once again pinning so that the bulk of the pleated material faces the side seam. Now I'm going to edge stitch each of the pleats in place as close to the folded edge as I can get, sewing from the top to 1.75 inches below the top edge for each pleat. I've given all of the pleats a press. Now I'm going to stay stitch along the top edge, which will also serve to keep the pleats in their proper orientation toward the side seams. Place your pocket facing pieces right sides together with the skirt along the corresponding slanted edges. And pin in place. Sew the pocket facings in place with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Flip the pocket facings over their seam allowances and we're going to understitch. Give those seams a good press, then we're going to sew the pocket facing to its seam allowance underneath with 1/8 inch seam allowance. Place the pocket bag piece right sides together with the pocket facing and pin in place along the outer curved edge, repeating on both sides for both pocket bags. Sew these curved edges with a 3/8 inch seam allowance and finish the raw edges together. Now we can turn our pockets to the inside of the garment along the main seam and pin the pockets in place along the side and top edges. Baste the pocket to the front skirt along the side and top edges. I've gone ahead and prepared my back skirt pieces in the same exact way as we did for the front skirt pieces. The only difference is that we're not going to be sewing that center seam as we're going to be putting in an invisible zipper. So I finished that center raw edge and formed each of the pleats, making sure that the bulk of the pleat is facing the side seam, and I stay stitched in place along the edge. Now I'll place my front and back skirt pieces right sides together and pin the side seams. Sew each side seam with a 5/8 inch seam allowance, finish the raw edges together, and press the seams toward the back of the skirt. Place the front and back facing pieces right sides together along the side seams and pin in place. You'll do the same for your remaining waistband pieces. In this case, I've applied interfacing to each of my inner waistband pieces. Sew each of the side seams with a 5/8 inch seam allowance and press the seams open. Along the bottom edge of my inner interfaced waistband piece, I folded that bottom raw edge to the wrong side by 3/8 of an inch all the way across. Place the outer waistband and the top of the skirt right sides together, aligning the notches and the side seams. Sew the bottom of the waistband to the top of the skirt with a 3/8 inch seam allowance from center back to center back. Then press the seam allowance up toward the waistband. I'll place my inner interfaced waistband piece right sides together with the sewn waistband, aligning the top edges and pin in place straight across. Sew the top edges together from center back to center back with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Then we'll understitch the facing in the same way as we did for the pocket facing, turning this interfaced piece over its seam allowance and sewing the facing to its seam allowance underneath with about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance straight across. For each of our finished center back edges, we're going to press those edges to the wrong side by 3/4 of an inch from top to bottom. Repeat on both center backs. This memory crease will help us as we insert the invisible zipper. Now with my invisible zipper opened up and the coils pressed open, I'm going to place my invisible zipper right sides together with the corresponding side of the skirt. I want the top zipper stop to be at the seam that joins the two waistband pieces. And the zipper teeth should be along the crease that we pressed with the iron. Pin this zipper tape in place from top to bottom. Sew the zipper in place using a zipper foot or an invisible zipper foot, sewing close to the zipper teeth from top to as close as you can get to the bottom of the zipper. Now that one side of the zipper is installed, we'll place the other side of the zipper tape right sides together with the opposite side of the center back. I like to close the zipper first so that I can make sure that both sides of the zipper tape are aligned at that top seam. Pin in place once again on this side, making sure that the zipper teeth are at the pressed line that you created. Sew your zipper tape in place in the same way as you did on the other side. Close the zipper and pin the remainder of the center back seam right sides together. With your zipper foot still installed so you can get as close to the end of the zipper as possible, sew from the bottom of your zipper stitches, backstitching to secure to the bottom of the skirt with a 3/4 inch seam allowance, then press the seam open. On both sides of the center back, we're going to fold the waistband pieces so that they're right sides together along the main seam. With the 3/8 inch bottom pressed edge of your inner waistband still folded upward, Pin the waistbands together along the raw edge. Repeating on both sides. We're going to sew those waistband pieces together from the top to the bottom folded edge of the facing. You can feel underneath where your zipper teeth are, and we're going to be sewing with our zipper foot, sewing close to the zipper teeth. Trim the top corners, and also trim that bottom pressed up corner of the inner waistband only. Turn those waistband corners right side out and give them a good press. From the outside of the skirt, we're going to pin along the main waistband seam, catching the bottom folded edge of the facing as we go. Edge stitch along that bottom waistband seam all the way around, or stitch in the ditch of the main seam. Either way, you should be catching the bottom fold of the facing all the way around. Place the center front and side hem facing pieces right sides together, aligning the single notches and pin in place. Sew with a 5/8 inch seam allowance and press the seams open. Then we'll place the center back hem facing pieces right sides together with the open edges of the side hem facing piece. Aligning the double notches and pinning in place on both sides. Sew those seams with a 5/8 inch seam allowance and press the seams open. Now that we have one continuous hem facing loop, we're going to finish the upper raw edges all the way around. Place the hem facing and the bottom of the skirt right sides together all along the bottom raw edges, matching the notches and pin in place. Once the facing is pinned in place all along the bottom of the skirt, sew with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Turn the facing over its seam allowance and we're going to understitch, sewing the facing to its seam allowance underneath with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now that that's understitched, turn the facing to the inside along the main seam and give the bottom of the skirt a good press. Then on the inside, we'll sew the hem facing in place all the way around along the finishing stitches. And now the skirt is complete. Thank you for watching this sew along. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future sewing tutorials, and I'll see you in the next video.